I'd like to welcome to the show producer and directors of the upcoming documentary, The Judge, Character, Cases, and Courage, Robert Griffith and Al Calderaro. How are you guys doing today?
Great, great.
Good, good. The documentary follows Judge Merhige, fought to protect the environment, women's rights, prison rights, and patients' rights. His biggest fight of all was for racial justice and equality in public schools of the former Confederate capital, Richmond, Virginia. To you, Robert, what kind of inspired you to tackle this project?
I was working in television at the time of a lot of the major cases coming before his bench. I worked in news and documentary work and TV. So I was pretty familiar with the judge and a lot of the iconic cases that came before his bench. But it was Al that came to me. We didn't know each other. He was looking around to join up with a filmmaker, and he found me and pitched the idea, and thought it was a good one, and we went from there.
Al, what kind of inspired you to approach or find a filmmaker to make this project about the judge?
Well, I had known about the judge because I lived in Richmond for a while, and moved into an office building that was owned by his son. And I was telling someone about my new office. They asked me why his father was famous, and I told them what I knew, which got me interested in finding out more. And the more I studied about the judge, the more interesting he became, and the more interested I got, and eventually thought, well, this was a good idea for a documentary film, because he was just in the middle of all this high profile stuff. And it's just one of those people in history who seems to wind up in the middle of everything. And so I thought, okay, this is a good idea for a documentary. I started looking for a director. Somebody had recommended Bob. I got in touch, told him what I was thinking. And he said, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. We can, because of who he was and where we are, we can probably get the funding and make the movie. And that's how it started. So I got in touch with Bob, and we started looking around for funding. Eventually became a nonprofit, because that was the only way we could get the documentary funded, through foundations and things like that. So that was how it happened. I mean, he just was in the middle of all kinds of heavy duty stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I was very interesting to me is he did have his hands in so much. And because of that, there was a lot of, you would say, kind of controversy that kind of followed him along, just because of the things that he was diving into, especially being in Richmond, Virginia, where it was the Confederate capital, and him being able to overchange so many different aspects of different people's lives. Robert, to you, what was one of the things that kind of surprised you about the judge?
I think, well, really, there were quite a few things that surprised me. But he was steady in his handling of cases. He worked by the Constitution. He was a man of great integrity, character. And as we were doing research, getting archival material, especially the material that we found where he was on videotape, it really started to become very clear what a strong individual he was, and charismatic at the same time. So, of course, when you go in the edit room and you start spending a lot of time and looking at this material, it sort of unfolds in front of him. So I started seeing his characters and his courage after about a year and a half in the edit room.
It really does stand out, because he was not afraid of tackling any sorts of controversy. And it was one of those things where he was the vocal point of everything because of that, right? What was it like kind of dissecting his past, where they start to question about, putting his kids in private school and stuff like that? What did you see behind the scenes that was directed towards him, maybe out of malicious acts because of what he was trying to do?
Obviously, because of what he was doing with the desegregation, he became a target for all kinds of harassment, essentially. and threats to his life, threats to his family's lives. Every time he went out in public, he had to go with the U.S. Marshals to protect him from potential threats. But he had been a World War II veteran and a member of a B-17 bomber crew, and flying combat missions over Germany and Austria, lots of flak, lots of fighters. He was kind of used to being under the gun, so to speak. I mean, literally under the gun. His crew had flown over for like 45 missions. So they were pretty battle hardened. And the judge would often say that, if Hitler couldn't kill me, I'm not worried about these people. So he was just, he not that you, I guess, ever feel comfortable in that situation, but he could handle that kind of stress. He had gone through more stress than that, and he just felt it was necessary to do his job, whatever it took. I mean, he wasn't going to let people frighten him away from his mission, which he thought was to do the right thing and the fair thing. So he just stayed the course, and that's one of the things about him that's so admirable. That under all this pressure, he held the law to be the sacred thing in this country. It was the country of laws, not of men. So I think that's the biggest thing. He just wasn't rattled. And he had been a trial attorney. He'd been a criminal defense attorney. So he was used to being in the courtroom. He was used to the give and take. He was used to being in front of juries. And so it was not that new to him. And being a trial attorney, he kind of liked the action. And so he was kind of comfortable. He was just one of those people who, in a situation that would rattle most folks, he was calm. So he was the center of calm in the midst of the storm of controversy and threats and danger, but it kept his eye on the fact that this is my job. This is what I have to do. I have to, as one of the people we interviewed said, my job is to call balls and strikes. And he just did that. He was able to do it under those kinds of situations, so that kind of pressure.
I think also in the film, Rod Smoller addresses the issue of him sending his children to private school. And as Smoller states in the film, he had the means, he was a father, he did his job as a judge, but it was his choice to send his children to private school. And of course, there was a lot of scrutiny over that, but he stood his ground, and that's what he did. And it was definitely addressed by people in the film, people that we interviewed.
Understanding that if you look back in time, a lot of individuals kind of say it's like it was so long ago. But for me, understanding him passing the law in 1970 about for the University of Virginia, for women being able to attend this college, thinking to myself, that's only 40 or 50 years ago. My math's terrible, but it was only about 50 years ago. When you were kind of unpacking when he did this, what was the most interesting, not kind of like most interesting facts, but what were some of the information you found whenever you're unpacking him getting this overturned and making University of Virginia kind of admit women and make them equal to everybody else?
Well, I mean,
he was on a panel. Isn't that correct, Al? He was on a panel of 2 other judges.
It was a 3-judge panel, and the judge was the one who wound up giving the ruling. And it was just, and what he was looking at was, okay, here we have a public university, and we have 50% of the taxpayers who are excluded from this public university. It's not fair. It's not right. And that was his guiding light. And one of the reasons we mentioned that in the film and the other cases that we deal with in the film is because we're still dealing with those issues. I mean, we're still dealing with, women's rights, equal pay. We're obviously still dealing with the hangover from living in a segregated country. We're still dealing with all the racial inequality issues. We're still dealing with environmental issues. We're still dealing with health issues. So all the things that the judge was dealing with, we're still dealing with. And his rulings in the Keepone case and the Dalcon Shield case are now used as models to settle those similar kinds of cases today. So he kind of set the mold for dealing with that type of case. And obviously his direct approach to handling the segregation issue, which is, all these people had moved out of the city of Richmond to avoid going to integrated schools. And he said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out and sort of get the people that moved away, and we're going to bring them back into the city so we can finally eliminate this concept of the other. And if you get people to deal with each other as people, they figure out that they're just people. And superficial distinctions like race don't matter, because then you're not looking at that. You're looking at what's the person like, not what's the color of their skin. And so he was trying to get us, move us forward to where we're just dealing with individuals. We're just dealing with people, and we're not dealing with like these blocks and making prejudgments based on superficialities. So we're still dealing with the same problems. So the judge was a trailblazer. He said, okay, let's deal with this stuff. Let's take it on. And, we're still looking for somebody to take it on. So, that was one of the things that attracted me to the film, or the idea of making the film. So.
Yeah. So another question to you, Al, is when people watch this back, what do you want them to kind of take away from this journey?
Well, obviously we want them to get to know the judge, but we also want them to start getting curious about what's in the Constitution, what really happens in the courts, what's the law really, what role is that playing in our lives, and that democracy is a participatory activity. You have to be involved. You have to know what's in the Constitution. You have to, call your congressperson. You have to vote. You actually have to get out there and vote. But you have to be involved. You have to know what's happening. You can't leave it up to somebody else. You can't assume that they're taking care of it, because in a lot of cases they're not taking care of it, or what they're taking care of is themselves, not your interests. So that's the thing, is to get people to, obviously be interested in the judge, but because of what the judge thought was important, the law, the Constitution, democracy, what a great country this is, because it is a democracy, but it's a participatory democracy, and you have to get involved. That's what I would like people to take away from the film, is that, okay, it's a great country, as Benjamin Franklin said, if you can keep it. And the way to keep it is to get involved and know what's going on.
Robert, same question to you.
Well, I think we all know that the last 4 years has been kind of a bumpy ride, to say the least. And I think that his character and courage as a judge, as an individual, would sure stand out and would be welcome today. And I think a lot of the feedback I've gotten about the film runs right down that road. We could sure use judge marriage today, or judge marriages today. And so he's timeless. I think that's a fact. And so I think when people look at the film with what we've gone through and what we're going through, it's not all behind us, for sure. And as Al was saying, I think people need to open their Constitution. I've got a little one on my desk here I was just looking for. Every now and then I go to it. I think it's a healthy way to start thinking, and pay attention to the laws of the land, and pay attention to your responsibility in regards to being a U.S. citizen. So, and anyone could have a day in court. So the better you're educated, the better that's going to go.
With me, one thing that I did take away from this, I didn't know a lot about the judge prior to watching the documentary. And then when you watch this, you're right, you take away from it, not only do you want to know more about him, but you want to know more about everything else that's kind of going on in society, and how you can help with that. Because as you hear the old adage, the judge was way before his time, right? You know what I mean? As you said, these days he would be a hero. And not that he said he's not a hero back then, but he'd be that guy in the forefront of all of these, whatever cases going on. But
Absolutely.
But I think for me personally, this story is very important to tell because we need another Judge Merhige in society, or 4 or 5. You know what I mean? If he was trailblazing back in that time frame where it is way more ridiculed, then I do believe somebody can kind of step up to the plate and kind of fill those shoes nowadays as well.
Well, all these young lawyers coming along, they all need to see it. And as he says in the film, if a lawyer's got something to say and it's important, you got to have everyone's attention. If it's not important, you got to not say anything. I love that line, and that's in his own words.
Absolutely as well. I got one more for you, Mr. Robert, before you go. So I look at your filmography. You tackled mental health, you tackled the farming, and now you tackle the judge. What kind of attracts you to these stories that are unique?
On the mental health side, and there are quite a few that aren't mentioned in this process of doing this film, but we call it, the social issues, and there are many of them. But I think there's so much today being revealed, so many needs. So I was in that world 15, 20 years ago and made quite a few films coming forward from that time, and met a lot of people along the way that changed my thinking, that really gave me a pause and a different perspective. I was wrong about a lot of things, I thought, but that's the beauty of being a filmmaker. A lot of times you're jumping into stories and topics that you're not deep in knowledge on, so you start doing your homework. But interviewing people, especially in that world, and the farming thing is just, I have a love for organic farming, good food. So that was a natural. I met some people that just really attracted my attention and how they were doing it. And so that was an easy one. But the mental health films, they're very challenging. They really are. And rewarding, I might add. Yeah.
Yeah, I firmly believe that we, as a society, don't take it as serious as enough as we do, as we should. I'm sure, as you've dove and talked to and interviewed individuals, we don't do a good job, and we don't do a good job of helping people either.
Yeah. I was at one, real quick, I was at a film festival in New York about 6 or 7 years ago when Voices of Hope and Recovery, and the film closed the festival. And so it was a very nice festival. Place was packed, and I'm up there doing the Q&A, and the first thing that came out was, have you ever had any issues? It was great. And it, again, gave me pause. Yeah, I guess I had a few bumps along the way, but I've learned a lot in this process thanks to this type of work. So that was really an interesting environment to be in, and a good Q&A, by the way. Yeah.
Robert, now, thank you so much for your time today. This documentary is fantastic. I highly recommend everybody checking out, not just to hear the story, but just to kind of hear you guys' words talk about him, but also what people can do moving forward to kind of help our future generations. So thank you guys so much for your time today.
Thank you.